Every night, as cities dim and conversations fade into silence, the human mind begins a strange migration inward. Behind closed eyes, in darkened bedrooms across the world, billions of people quietly enter realities that do not physically exist, yet feel completely convincing while they are happening. A person may walk through a childhood home that no longer stands. They may speak with someone who has been gone for decades. They may drift above oceans, wander through impossible architecture, or relive moments their waking mind had nearly forgotten. And through it all, the sleeping brain accepts these shifting worlds with remarkable calm. Dreaming is one of the oldest mysteries humans have ever carried into the night. Long before neuroscience laboratories and brain scans, ancient civilizations treated dreams as messages from somewhere beyond ordinary life. In ancient Mesopotamia, kings recorded dreams onto clay tablets, believing they contained warnings from the gods. In ancient Egypt, priests slept in sacred temples hoping to receive healing visions during the night. The Greeks imagined dreams arriving through hidden gates in the sky, some carrying truth, others illusion. Even now, after centuries of scientific advancement, dreams remain strangely resistant to complete explanation because dreaming sits at the border between biology and imagination. It is physical, measurable, electrical, and yet it also feels deeply personal, emotional, almost spiritual at times. A dream cannot be held in the hand or replayed exactly as it happened. The moment consciousness fully returns, much of it dissolves. Images fade, conversations vanish, entire dream worlds disappear within seconds of waking, as though the brain itself quietly sweeps away the evidence before morning begins. And perhaps that is part of what makes dreaming so relaxing to think about late at night. Dreams remind us that the mind is larger than our daily routines. Beneath schedules and responsibilities, beneath the constant noise of waking life, there exists another landscape entirely, one that awakens only in darkness. Inside the sleeping brain, remarkable changes begin almost immediately. Body temperature slowly drops, muscles loosen, heart rate softens, electrical rhythms shift across vast networks of neurons. And then, several times each night, the brain enters a state known as REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. During REM sleep, the eyes move gently beneath closed eyelids, as though watching invisible events unfold somewhere beyond the room itself. This is the stage most associated with vivid dreaming. Curiously, the brain during REM sleep can appear almost as active as the brain during waking life. Certain emotional and visual regions become highly energized, while areas linked to logic and self-control grow quieter. In a sense, the dreaming mind becomes emotionally awake, while rational oversight softens in the background. This may explain why dreams can feel simultaneously meaningful and absurd. A person may calmly accept impossible situations without question. Hallways stretch infinitely, time bends, gravity disappears. Yet within the dream, everything feels internally coherent. The sleeping brain is not trying to create accurate reality. It is creating experience. And experience, in its purest form, is not always logical. Some neuroscientists believe dreams may help the brain organize memory, processing fragments of emotion and information gathered during the day. Others suggest dreaming acts almost like overnight therapy, allowing difficult feelings to be explored safely within symbolic narratives. There are even theories proposing that dreams evolved as simulations, ancient mental rehearsals for survival, social interaction, or danger. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of dreaming is that no single theory fully captures it. Dreams seem to resist reduction. A person may spend years studying sleep science, only to awaken one morning deeply moved by a dream they cannot fully explain. A dream can feel trivial one night and profoundly important the next. Some dreams vanish instantly, others remain vivid for entire lifetimes. Many elderly people can still recall certain childhood dreams in astonishing detail. The color of the sky, the sound of footsteps, the feeling of standing somewhere impossible. Meanwhile, yesterday's ordinary events may already be forgotten. Memory itself behaves differently inside dreams. The brain often combines distant experiences into entirely new forms. A friend's voice may emerge from a stranger's face. A modern city may contain rooms from an old childhood house. The dreaming mind is constantly blending time periods, locations, emotions, and identities into fluid narratives that ignore the rigid categories of waking life. In this sense, dreaming reveals something quietly important about consciousness itself. The human mind is not a fixed recording device. It is a living storyteller. Even during sleep, the brain continues shaping meaning from fragments. Scientists studying dreams sometimes describe the sleeping brain as a prediction machine. During waking hours, the brain constantly anticipates what will happen next based on previous experience. In dreams, however, those predictive systems become untethered from external reality. Without incoming sensory information from the outside world, the brain begins generating entire environments internally. The result is astonishing. Every night, the human brain becomes both the audience and the theater. It designs landscapes, characters, weather, movement, tension, dialogue, and emotion entirely from neural activity inside a darkened skull resting quietly on a pillow. And despite this extraordinary complexity, most people experience it as something completely ordinary, perhaps because dreaming has accompanied humanity for so long that it feels natural. Children dream before they fully understand language. Animals appear to dream as well. Dogs twitch softly in sleep. Cats move their paws as though stalking invisible creatures through tall grass. Even certain birds display sleep patterns resembling dream states. The phenomenon stretches far beyond human culture, reaching deep into evolutionary history. Some researchers believe dreaming may have existed in primitive forms for hundreds of millions of years, which means that long before cities existed, before books, before music, before civilization itself, sleeping creatures may already have been drifting through internal worlds beneath ancient night skies. There is something deeply calming about that continuity. Tonight, somewhere in the Arctic, snow falls silently outside small illuminated windows while people dream beneath heavy blankets. Elsewhere, warm ocean air moves through open tropical rooms where sleepers drift through entirely different inner landscapes. Millions of separate dream worlds unfold simultaneously across the planet every single night, each one temporary, private, and unseen by anyone else, an invisible migration of consciousness. And although dreams can sometimes feel strange or unsettling, most dreaming occurs within the brain's natural rhythms of restoration. Sleep is not passive emptiness, it is active maintenance. Cells repair themselves, memories stabilize, emotional systems recalibrate. The brain carefully cleans metabolic waste through microscopic fluid channels that become more active during deep sleep, almost like a quiet nocturnal housekeeping system flowing through neural pathways. The sleeping mind is busy caring for itself in ways waking consciousness rarely notices, and somewhere within that maintenance process, dreams emerge like weather patterns moving across an internal sky, sometimes soft and fragmented, sometimes vivid beyond explanation, sometimes so emotionally real that the feeling lingers long after the images disappear. As scientists continued studying sleep through the 20th century, another curious discovery slowly emerged. The content of dreams often reflects emotional concerns more than literal daily events. A person anxious about change may dream of missing trains, endless staircases, or unfamiliar roads. Someone grieving may encounter lost loved ones in strangely peaceful settings. The dreaming brain appears less interested in factual replay than emotional translation. It speaks in symbols more than direct statements, and that symbolic language may explain why dreams have fascinated philosophers, psychologists, artists, and spiritual traditions for thousands of years. In the early 20th century, the Austrian neurologist Sigmund Freud proposed that dreams were hidden expressions of unconscious desire. Later, the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung believed dreams reached even deeper, touching ancient symbolic patterns shared across humanity itself. Modern neuroscience has challenged many of their conclusions, yet one aspect of their work still lingers quietly in scientific discussions today: the recognition that dreams are emotionally meaningful, even when they are irrational. A dream rarely behaves like a straightforward message. Instead, it resembles a shifting collage assembled from memory, sensation, fear, hope, and association. The brain pulls fragments from different corners of experience and gently stitches them together into temporary realities. A doorway from childhood may open into a future that has never happened. A conversation may contain emotions too subtle for waking language. The dreaming mind speaks fluently in metaphor because emotion itself is often metaphorical, and perhaps this explains why certain dreams feel impossible to forget. Not because the events were real, but because the emotions were. A person may awaken from a dream carrying a strange feeling of nostalgia for a place that never existed. They may miss someone they only met while asleep. They may feel comforted by an imagined landscape the waking world could never reproduce. Dreams can generate authentic emotional experiences from entirely artificial environments, revealing how deeply perception shapes reality inside the human brain. Neuroscientists have discovered that during REM sleep, the amygdala, a region strongly connected to emotion and memory, becomes especially active. Meanwhile, parts of the prefrontal cortex associated with logical analysis become less dominant. The result is a mental state where feelings often guide the experience more than rational structure. In waking life, logic acts like an editor. In dreams, the editor briefly leaves the room. What remains is a freer flow of imagery, association, and emotional movement. This may be one reason dreams sometimes feel creatively powerful. Artists, scientists, composers, and inventors throughout history have described ideas emerging from dreams with startling clarity. The structure of the benzene molecule reportedly appeared to the chemist Auguste Kekule through a dreamlike vision of a serpent forming a circle. The melody for the song Yesterday arrived unexpectedly to Paul McCartney during sleep. Even the sewing machine needle was partially inspired by dream imagery experienced by inventor Elias Howe. The dreaming brain is not idle. It continues experimenting, quietly rearranging information, testing emotional connections, exploring possibilities beyond ordinary linear thought. And yet, despite all this internal activity, sleepers often appear completely still from the outside. A person resting peacefully in darkness may simultaneously be crossing imaginary deserts, revisiting lost memories, or standing inside impossible cities constructed entirely from neural signals. There is something profoundly humbling about that contrast. The outer body becomes motionless, while the inner world expands. Sleep laboratories studying dreams have occasionally recorded sleepers smiling, frowning, whispering, or briefly laughing during REM sleep. Tiny physical reactions escape from invisible narratives unfolding inside the brain. Sometimes the body responds to dreams before consciousness even realizes what is happening. A sudden falling sensation may trigger a muscle jerk. A frightening dream may increase heart rate. An emotional reunion may produce real tears. The line between dreamed emotion and waking biology is thinner than it first appears. After all, the brain processes both experiences using many of the same systems. To the nervous system, imagined experiences can still matter. This becomes especially visible in nightmares. Though unpleasant, nightmares may serve important psychological functions. Some researchers believe they help the brain rehearse responses to danger or process unresolved emotional stress. Children commonly experience nightmares as their developing minds learn to navigate fear, uncertainty, and imagination simultaneously. Adults too often dream more intensely during periods of transition, grief, anxiety, or emotional change. The sleeping mind continues trying to understand the emotional texture of life, even when the waking self would rather avoid it. And yet dreams are not only about fear. Many are deeply peaceful. Some people describe dreams filled with warm light, endless landscapes, slow conversations, or impossible moments of calm. Others experience flying dreams, drifting weightlessly above forests, oceans, or quiet cities at night. Researchers are still uncertain why flying appears so frequently in dreams, though some suspect it may arise from the brain's altered sense of body position during REM sleep. Whatever the cause, the feeling often remains unforgettable, a temporary freedom from gravity, a gentle release from physical limitation. Even people who rarely remember dreams sometimes recall the sensation of floating, perhaps because the human mind has always been fascinated by transcendence. Dreams offer temporary liberation from ordinary rules. Walls disappear, distance collapses, the dead return briefly, time loops backward. Entire years may seem to pass inside experiences lasting only minutes. In fact, the brain's perception of time during dreams remains one of the most fascinating mysteries in sleep science. Most dreams occur within relatively short periods, especially during later REM cycles near morning. Yet dream narratives can feel astonishingly expansive. A sleeper may experience long journeys, detailed conversations, or complex emotional arcs within remarkably compressed spans of real time. Consciousness, it seems, does not require clock time to construct meaningful experience. The dreaming mind measures reality differently, and perhaps waking life does as well. More often than we notice, moments of danger feel longer. Childhood summers feel endless in memory. Quiet evenings disappear quickly. Human perception stretches and compresses time constantly, and dreams reveal this flexibility in its purest form. There are also rare moments when dreamers become aware they are dreaming while still asleep. This phenomenon, known as lucid dreaming, has fascinated cultures for centuries. In lucid dreams, parts of self-awareness return without fully ending the dream state. Some lucid dreamers learn to guide portions of the experience consciously, exploring dream environments with surprising clarity. Brain scans suggest lucid dreaming involves unusual combinations of REM sleep activity and partial reactivation of self-reflective regions in the brain. In other words, the sleeper becomes both participant and observer simultaneously, an extraordinary hybrid state, neither fully awake nor fully unconscious. Some people use lucid dreaming for creativity or emotional exploration. Others simply experience it spontaneously a few times across their lives. And interestingly, lucid dreams often begin at moments when the dream itself becomes too strange to ignore. A person notices impossible architecture. A clock behaves incorrectly. Gravity shifts. Suddenly the mind realizes, quietly and almost playfully, that none of it belongs to waking reality. Yet instead of collapsing, the dream continues, as though consciousness has stepped backstage while the performance is still unfolding. Even now, despite decades of research, scientists cannot fully explain why subjective experience exists at all, why electrical activity inside the brain should produce the feeling of being someone. Dreams deepen this mystery further. They demonstrate that consciousness can generate entire realities internally, complete with emotion, narrative, memory, sensation, and identity, all while disconnected from the external world. Every night, the brain becomes an architect of invisible universes, and by morning, most of them are gone, forgotten almost instantly, like footprints disappearing beneath new snow. Still, traces remain. A mood, a strange image, a feeling difficult to name. Sometimes dreams influence waking decisions without people realizing it. A forgotten dream may subtly shape emotional tone throughout the following day. Researchers studying memory consolidation suspect that dreaming and emotional processing are deeply intertwined. Though the exact mechanisms remain elusive, the sleeping mind continues its silent work beneath awareness, shaping emotional life in ways far more subtle than most people ever notice. There is a quiet moment that sometimes happens just before waking, when a dream begins dissolving but has not entirely disappeared. The room slowly returns. Morning light presses faintly against the eyelids. Distant sounds from the outside world begin entering awareness again. And yet part of the mind still remains inside the dream for a few fragile seconds, suspended between two realities at once. In that threshold state, dreams can feel unusually profound. A simple sentence spoken by an imagined person may seem filled with meaning. An ordinary landscape may carry overwhelming emotional weight. Then, almost inevitably, the details begin slipping away. The brain transitions fully into waking consciousness, and the dream fragments scatter before they can be captured completely. Scientists still debate why dreams fade so quickly from memory. One theory suggests that the neurochemical environment during REM sleep is poorly suited for forming stable long-term memories. Certain neurotransmitters associated with waking memory formation behave differently while dreaming. Another possibility is that forgetting dreams may actually protect the brain from confusion. If every dream remained vivid indefinitely, the boundary between imagined and lived experience might become dangerously unstable. So the mind lets most dreams go, not violently, quietly, like mist lifting from water at sunrise. And perhaps there is something deeply merciful in that forgetting. Dreams are temporary worlds, never meant to remain fully solid in daylight. Their power often comes precisely from their fragility. A dream lingers not because it can be perfectly recalled, but because it leaves behind emotional echoes difficult to translate into language. Some dreams become softer with time until only a feeling survives. Others remain unnervingly detailed for decades. Researchers have found that emotionally intense dreams are more likely to persist in memory, especially those involving fear, awe, grief, or profound familiarity. Curiously, many people also report recurring dreams that revisit similar places or situations throughout life. A hallway, a staircase, a distant house, an endless road. Sometimes these recurring dream settings feel more familiar than real locations from waking life. The dream landscape develops its own geography, returning again and again across years, as though the brain maintains hidden internal worlds beneath conscious awareness. No one fully understands why this happens, but it reveals something fascinating about the architecture of memory and imagination. The mind is not merely storing information, it is constructing environments, emotional maps, symbolic terrain shaped by experience, fear, desire, and association. In dreams, the brain becomes both storyteller and landscape designer simultaneously. And while modern neuroscience explains many mechanisms of sleep with increasing precision, the subjective experience of dreaming remains deeply mysterious. Brain imaging can show regions activating during REM sleep. Electrodes can measure neural rhythms. Laboratories can monitor eye movement and breathing patterns through the night. Yet none of these measurements fully capture what it feels like to stand inside a dream while it unfolds around you. Science can describe the storm, but experience remains inside the rain itself. This tension between measurable biology and private consciousness sits at the heart of dream research. Dreams are among the most universal human experiences, yet also among the most isolated. No one else can directly enter another person's dream. Even identical twins sleeping beside one another inhabit completely separate inner realities. Each mind wanders alone through its own nocturnal universe. And perhaps that solitude explains why dreams often feel strangely intimate. They emerge from the deepest layers of personal memory and emotion, revealing combinations no waking performance can fully control. During sleep, social masks loosen. The carefully managed narrative of the daytime self becomes softer and more fluid. The dreaming mind is less concerned with appearances. It moves according to emotional gravity instead. This is partly why dreams can expose hidden anxieties with startling honesty. A confident person may dream of vulnerability. Someone outwardly calm may wander through endless confusion. Beneath waking identity, the mind continues processing unresolved feelings with quiet persistence. But dreams can also restore wonder. Many people recall dreams more beautiful than anything they have experienced while awake. Vast libraries glowing with golden light, silent snowy forests beneath unfamiliar stars, ancient cities suspended above oceans, gentle conversations with people who no longer exist in waking life. The visual imagination of the dreaming brain can be astonishingly rich. And interestingly, blind individuals dream as well, though the sensory qualities differ depending on when blindness occurred. Those born blind often experience dreams centered around sound, touch, movement, spatial awareness, and emotion rather than visual imagery. This reveals something profound about dreaming itself. Dreams are not merely visual movies. They are immersive consciousness experiences. The brain constructs reality using whatever sensory tools are available. Even animals appear to enter similar internal states. Scientists observing sleeping mammals have recorded patterns suggesting memory replay during sleep. Rats navigating mazes while awake later show related neural firing patterns during sleep, as though the brain is quietly revisiting previous experiences. Some researchers believe this replay process may help strengthen learning and memory consolidation. Meanwhile, pet owners often notice animals twitching, vocalizing, or moving during sleep in ways that suggest active dream experiences. A sleeping dog suddenly running in place, a cat's whiskers trembling as though tracking movement through invisible grass. These small nighttime movements hint at a possibility both comforting and ancient, that many creatures may share some version of inner dreaming worlds. If true, dreaming becomes not merely a human mystery, but a biological phenomenon woven deeply into life itself, an evolutionary rhythm stretching across species and millions of years. And through all of this, sleep remains one of the most vulnerable states any creature can enter. To sleep is to surrender awareness temporarily. Muscles relax, defenses lower, conscious control fades. From an evolutionary perspective, this vulnerability appears risky, yet nearly every complex animal sleeps in some form despite the dangers, which suggests the benefits are extraordinarily important. Life itself seems to require periods of withdrawal into altered consciousness. Without adequate sleep, human perception begins unraveling surprisingly quickly. Emotional regulation weakens, memory falters, attention fragments. Hallucinations may emerge after prolonged sleep deprivation. The mind loses coherence when denied rest for too long, revealing how essential dreaming and sleep truly are to psychological stability. The sleeping brain is not escaping reality. It is maintaining the ability to experience reality coherently at all. And somewhere inside this nightly restoration process, dreams drift through consciousness like deep ocean currents beneath the visible surface of life. Most people spend roughly 6 years of their lives dreaming. 6 years inside imagined realities. 6 years walking through places that vanish each morning. When viewed this way, dreaming no longer seems like a small side effect of sleep. It becomes one of the major landscapes of human existence itself, an enormous hidden continent experienced privately by every mind across a lifetime, a parallel life unfolding silently beside the waking one. And perhaps this is why dreams continue to fascinate humanity even in an age dominated by technology and data. The modern world measures, records, calculates, and explains with increasing precision, yet every night, consciousness still enters a realm that remains partly beyond capture, a realm made of memory, emotion, symbolism, sensation, and mystery, a place where the laws of ordinary reality soften just enough for the mind to reveal its deeper textures. In many ways, dreams reveal that the human mind is far less fixed than it appears during the day. Waking consciousness feels stable because the brain continuously filters reality into a coherent narrative. Names remain attached to faces, gravity behaves consistently, time moves in one direction. The world appears solid and dependable, but dreaming exposes how carefully constructed that stability truly is. When sensory input from the outside world fades during sleep, the brain begins generating experience from within itself. And once freed from ordinary constraints, consciousness becomes fluid, identity shifts easily, environments transform without warning. The impossible becomes emotionally acceptable. A person may be both observer and participant at the same time, existing inside experiences that waking logic could never sustain. Yet, despite this instability, dreams rarely feel meaningless while they are occurring. The mind commits fully to the experience, and perhaps this capacity for immersion explains something larger about human consciousness. People do not experience reality directly. They experience interpretations constructed by the brain. Colors, sounds, textures, emotions, all are internal representations created from electrical signals. Dreams simply reveal this hidden process more openly. In a sense, waking life and dreaming may be less separate than they first appear. Both are carefully assembled models of experience. One is guided strongly by external sensory input. The other is guided mostly from within. This realization has fascinated philosophers for centuries. Some ancient traditions even viewed waking life itself as dreamlike, temporary, shifting, difficult to fully grasp. In Chinese philosophy, the story of Zhuangzhou tells of a man who dreamed he was a butterfly, then awoke wondering whether he was truly a man who had dreamed of being a butterfly or a butterfly now dreaming of being a man. The story endures because it touches something unsettling and beautiful at the same time. Consciousness is intimate, yet mysterious even to itself. No person can step fully outside their own awareness to examine it objectively. The brain studies the universe while also being the instrument through which the universe is experienced. Dreams magnify this paradox. They demonstrate how convincingly the mind can fabricate realities internally, complete with emotion, narrative, and memory. And still, most mornings, people simply rise from bed and continue their routines as though nothing extraordinary happened overnight. Coffee brews, traffic begins, phones illuminate. Yet only minutes earlier, the same mind may have been standing in impossible landscapes beneath unfamiliar skies. There is something almost cinematic about that transition. Human beings move constantly between worlds without fully noticing. Researchers studying sleep cycles have discovered that dreaming changes across the lifespan. Infants spend remarkable amounts of time in REM sleep, far more than adults. Scientists suspect this may support rapid brain development as young minds learn to organize sensory information and build foundational neural networks. Children often experience especially vivid dreams and nightmares, perhaps because their understanding of reality itself is still forming. As people age, dream patterns gradually shift. Elderly adults often report fewer intensely emotional dreams, though this varies widely between individuals. Memory changes, sleep architecture evolves, and nighttime awakenings become more common. Yet dreaming never disappears entirely. Even near the end of life, the mind continues generating internal narratives during sleep. Some hospice workers and medical researchers have described patients experiencing vivid dreams or visions shortly before death, often involving travel, reunions, or peaceful transitions. Science approaches such reports cautiously, yet the emotional consistency across cultures is striking. Throughout history, humans have sensed a connection between dreams and the larger mysteries of existence, not necessarily because dreams predict anything supernatural, but because they remind people that consciousness itself is already extraordinary. A universe capable of dreaming is a strange universe indeed. There are also moments when dreams seem to blur unexpectedly into waking life. Many people have experienced hypnagogic imagery, the drifting visions and sensations that arise while falling asleep. Fleeting faces appear in darkness. Fragments of voices emerge. Shapes move softly behind closed eyes. During these transitional states, the brain is neither fully awake nor fully asleep. Reality loosens gently around the edges. Another related phenomenon occurs during sleep paralysis, when a person becomes partially awake before the body fully exits REM muscle inhibition. The mind regains awareness while the body remains temporarily unable to move. Throughout history, cultures interpreted this frightening experience in supernatural ways. Nighttime spirits, shadow figures, unseen presences sitting beside the bed. Modern neuroscience now explains much of the mechanism behind sleep paralysis. Yet the experience remains deeply unsettling for many people because dream imagery can briefly overlap with waking perception. The boundary between inner and outer reality becomes uncertain, and this may be one reason dreams have inspired so much mythology across human history. Dreaming reveals how thin the membrane of ordinary consciousness can sometimes feel. The brain is not a rigid machine. It is a living process, constantly shifting between modes of perception. Even the simple act of falling asleep represents an extraordinary neurological transition. Each night, consciousness gradually dissolves from focused external awareness into drifting abstraction. Thoughts lose structure, images become freer, memory fragments intermingle with sensation. Then, without most people noticing the exact moment it happens, the waking self disappears into sleep. It is one of the most universal human experiences, yet also one of the strangest. Every night, people willingly surrender consciousness without fear because they trust they will return in the morning. Very few other experiences require such faith. Perhaps this nightly surrender is part of why sleep often feels spiritually symbolic across cultures. Darkness arrives, consciousness fades, dreams emerge, then awareness returns again with morning light. Ancient humans living beneath vast star-filled skies would have experienced this rhythm with particular intensity. Before electric light, night transformed the world completely. Fires dimmed, landscapes vanished into darkness. Dreams likely felt even more powerful when waking reality itself became mysterious after sunset. And somewhere in those ancient nights, humanity began telling stories about dreams. Stories carried through generations around fires, inside temples, through poetry, philosophy, religion, and eventually science. Dreams became omens, warnings, artistic inspiration, divine messages, psychological symbols, neurological puzzles. Entire civilizations attempted to interpret what the sleeping mind was trying to say. Yet perhaps dreams endure partly because they resist final explanation. The moment a mystery becomes fully solved, some of its emotional gravity disappears. Dreams continue captivating human curiosity because they remain balanced between understanding and uncertainty. Science explains their mechanisms increasingly well, but the subjective experience still feels strangely untouchable. No brain scan can fully capture the feeling of standing inside a forgotten childhood home while rain falls softly beyond dream windows. No equation perfectly explains why certain dream images feel sacred, nostalgic, or haunting, and maybe they are not meant to be reduced completely. Some experiences exist partly to remind human beings that consciousness is larger and more layered than daily routines suggest. Late at night, when the world grows quiet and people prepare once again to drift into sleep, the mind approaches that ancient threshold almost casually. Pillows adjust, breathing slows, thoughts begin softening around the edges, then the transformation begins again. Neurons flicker through changing rhythms, memory loosens its grip on the present, the outer world recedes, and somewhere beneath closed eyelids, another reality slowly starts to form. At first, the transition is subtle. A wandering thought becomes an image becomes movement. Fragments of conversation appear without context. Perhaps there is the sensation of walking somewhere familiar, though the details remain unstable and unfinished. The waking mind still lingers nearby, quietly observing the edges of sleep as they gather around consciousness like fog moving across water. Then, gradually, the threshold disappears. The dream accepts you completely. What is remarkable is how quickly the brain adapts to these impossible realities once sleep deepens. In waking life, the mind constantly checks the world for consistency. But during dreams, that critical filtering softens. A person may speak fluently with someone from decades earlier without noticing anything unusual. Rooms may open into oceans. Seasons may change instantly. Entire cities may rearrange themselves between one glance and the next. And still, the dream continues with calm confidence. The sleeping mind seems less concerned with factual accuracy than emotional continuity. Dreams follow feeling more than physics. One scene transforms into another through emotional association rather than logical sequence, almost like memory itself becoming fluid and alive. This may explain why dreams often feel cinematic, not because they resemble films exactly, but because they move through symbolic transitions rather than strict realism. A glance becomes a landscape, a memory becomes weather, emotion shapes environment in real time, anxiety narrows hallways, peace expands open skies, loneliness creates empty stations and silent roads stretching endlessly into darkness. The dreaming brain externalizes inner experience. Feelings become geography, and perhaps this is one reason certain dreams stay with people for years. Dreams sometimes express emotional truths too subtle or complex for ordinary language. A person may awaken understanding something emotionally before they can explain it intellectually. The dream bypasses analytical thought and communicates directly through sensation, symbolism, and atmosphere. This direct emotional communication appears especially powerful in dreams involving loved ones. Many people report dreams where deceased family members or old friends appear with extraordinary vividness. Scientifically, these experiences likely emerge from memory networks and emotional attachment systems operating during sleep. Yet despite this neurological explanation, Such dreams often feel deeply meaningful to the dreamer, not because they prove anything supernatural, but because the emotional encounter feels real while it lasts. The brain stores social bonds with incredible depth. Voices, facial expressions, gestures, emotional patterns, all remain encoded within neural pathways long after physical absence begins. During dreams, those networks can reactivate with astonishing clarity, temporarily reconstructing the presence of someone who no longer exists in waking life. In this way, dreaming may partially preserve continuity across loss, a quiet emotional bridge between memory and absence. There is something profoundly human about that. Dreams also reveal how much of the mind operates beneath conscious awareness. During the day, attention narrows around practical tasks, conversations, deadlines, decisions, distractions. But during sleep, hidden emotional material often resurfaces indirectly. Minor worries ignored during waking hours may return symbolically at night. Small experiences the conscious mind dismissed may quietly reappear inside dreams days later. The sleeping brain notices more than people realize, and it continues sorting through those impressions long after conscious thought has moved on. Researchers studying memory consolidation believe sleep plays a crucial role in deciding which experiences become stabilized in long-term memory. During certain stages of sleep, the hippocampus, deeply involved in memory formation, appears to replay patterns of neural activity associated with waking experiences. In essence, the brain rehearses parts of the day while sleeping. But dreams are not exact recordings. They are transformations. The brain extracts emotional significance, patterns, associations, and fragments, weaving them into narratives that often appear strange on the surface yet emotionally coherent underneath. A stressful meeting may become an endless maze. Anticipation may appear as trains departing from crowded stations. Hope may emerge as sunlight breaking through impossible clouds. The language of dreams is rarely literal. Instead, it resembles the language of music, painting, or myth. Forms that communicate through emotional resonance rather than direct explanation. And perhaps this is why dreams have inspired art for thousands of years. Writers, filmmakers, painters, and composers repeatedly return to dream imagery because dreams naturally contain the qualities humans find most psychologically compelling: mystery, transformation, symbolism, fear, beauty, fragmentation, longing. Dreams feel ancient because they emerge from ancient structures within the mind itself, long before modern language evolved. Early humans likely dreamed beneath open skies, much as people do today. Imagine small groups gathered beside fading fires tens of thousands of years ago, beyond the light-weighted forests, predators, darkness, and unknown distances. Sleep would have carried those early minds into dream worlds shaped by survival, memory, and imagination. And by morning, they too must have shared dreams with one another. Warnings, visions, strange encounters. The beginning of storytelling itself may have been influenced partly by dreams. Narrative imagination, symbolic thinking, emotional metaphor, all flourish naturally inside the dreaming brain. Dreams may have quietly helped teach humanity how to tell stories long before written language existed. Even now, modern cinema often mimics dream structure more than waking reality. Sudden transitions, symbolic imagery, emotional pacing, nonlinear time. Viewers instinctively understand these patterns because the human mind experiences similar structures internally every night. The architecture of dreams may be woven deeply into human creativity itself. There are also dreams that seem unusually ordinary, not dramatic or surreal, but almost indistinguishable from waking life. A person dreams of routine conversations, familiar places, simple errands. Then they awaken briefly confused about whether certain events truly happened. These realistic dreams demonstrate how convincingly the brain can simulate everyday experience when external sensory input is absent. Consciousness accepts internally generated reality surprisingly easily, and that realization has become increasingly relevant in modern neuroscience and philosophy. If the brain constructs all conscious experience internally, then waking reality itself depends entirely on interpretation of sensory signals. The external world exists, of course, but every human being experiences only the brain's representation of it. Dreams simply reveal the construction process more openly. The philosopher René Descartes once wondered whether it was possible to know with absolute certainty that one was awake rather than dreaming. Centuries later, neuroscience still grapples with related questions about consciousness, perception, and subjective reality. What does it truly mean to experience a world? How does matter become awareness? Why should neural activity produce the feeling of being someone at all? Dreams do not answer these questions, but they illuminate them beautifully, because every dream demonstrates that consciousness can generate entire experiential worlds from darkness alone. And perhaps the most peaceful aspect of dreaming is this quiet reminder. Beneath the noise of modern life, the human mind still contains immense hidden depth. Beneath emails, schedules, traffic, notifications, and routines, there remains an ancient inner landscape that awakens every night when the lights go out. A landscape shaped by memory and imagination, by emotion and biology, by mystery and time. And each evening, without fail, consciousness returns once more to explore it. As sleep deepens further, the structure of dreaming begins to shift again. The early night often brings more stable cycles, where dreams may feel coherent, even narrative-like. But in the later hours, especially closer to morning, REM sleep periods tend to grow longer, and dream intensity often increases. It is during these final cycles that some of the most vivid and emotionally charged dreams tend to emerge, as if the mind is completing its nightly work in more elaborate forms before waking. At this stage, time inside dreams becomes even more fluid. A single scene can stretch endlessly without feeling repetitive, or an entire sequence of events may unfold in what feels like moments. The brain no longer tracks duration in any reliable way. Instead, experience is shaped by emotional momentum. A feeling of urgency can compress time. A feeling of calm can stretch it outward, making minutes feel like hours. This elasticity reveals something essential about consciousness itself. Time, as experienced by the mind, is not fixed. It is constructed. Inside dreams, this construction becomes visible because the usual external anchors are gone. No clocks are being checked. No sunlight is entering through windows. No environmental cues are guiding awareness forward. The brain generates both the events and the sense of their passage simultaneously. In this way, dreaming becomes a laboratory of pure perception, a place where experience is built from the inside out. And within that internal construction, certain recurring patterns appear across cultures and individuals. People who have never met report remarkably similar dream experiences: falling, being chased, arriving late, losing teeth, flying, or finding themselves in unfamiliar versions of familiar places. These recurring motifs have been studied for decades in psychology. While interpretations vary widely, one consistent observation remains: many common dream themes are closely linked to emotional states that are nearly universal in human life. Fear of loss, fear of failure, desire for freedom, anxiety about change, curiosity about the unknown. The dreaming mind does not invent emotions. It reshapes them, and sometimes exaggerates them just enough to make them visible. A small worry during the day may become a vast landscape of pursuit at night. A quiet sense of uncertainty may transform into an endless corridor with no visible exit. Yet despite their intensity, these dreams rarely carry literal meaning. They are not messages in the simple sense. They are explorations of emotional patterns, expressed in symbolic form. The brain is not speaking in sentences during dreams, it is speaking in states. This is why dream interpretation has always been so challenging. The same symbol can mean different things for different people, or even for the same person at different times. A house might represent memory, identity, safety, or change depending on context. Water might feel peaceful in one dream and overwhelming in another. Meaning is not fixed. It shifts with emotional tone. Modern neuroscience tends to avoid rigid symbolic dictionaries for this reason. Instead, it focuses on processes, memory consolidation, emotional regulation, neural activation patterns, and predictive modeling. Yet even within this scientific framework, there is growing recognition that dreams serve multiple functions simultaneously. They are not a single-purpose system. They are a convergence of many overlapping processes occurring while consciousness is offline from the external world. Memory is reorganized, emotion is processed, associations are tested, and experience is recombined into new forms. The result is dreaming. But even this description feels incomplete when compared to lived experience, because to the dreamer, none of this appears as processing. It appears as reality, another life unfolding in real time. And that is perhaps the most remarkable feature of dreams, their ability to create full immersion without physical substance. The brain does not distinguish sharply between externally generated and internally generated experience while dreaming. Sensory regions activate in ways that closely resemble waking perception. Visual areas construct images, auditory regions generate sound, motor systems simulate movement, emotional centers respond as if events are truly happening. The mind is both creator and participant, and for as long as the dream lasts, there is no separation between the two roles, only experience. When morning finally approaches, this immersive state begins to unravel. Sleep cycles shift. External sounds penetrate more easily. Light begins influencing circadian rhythms through the eyelids. Gradually, the dreaming brain reduces the depth of its internal simulation. But even then, the transition is not abrupt. It is layered. Fragments of dream content linger as awareness returns. Images dissolve slowly rather than disappearing instantly. A person may wake with the feeling that something important was just happening, even if the details are gone. This lingering emotional residue is often more persistent than the narrative itself, a mood without a story, a memory without images, just a quiet impression carried into waking life. And sometimes, that impression shapes the entire tone of the morning. Neuroscientists have observed that sleep inertia, the grogginess experienced immediately after waking, may interact with residual dream activity, temporarily blurring the boundary between states of consciousness. In those early waking moments, the brain is still re-establishing full executive control, while emotional systems may still carry traces of dream-related activation. This may explain why mornings can sometimes feel strangely reflective or emotionally tinted without an obvious cause. The dream has not fully ended. It has simply changed form. Over time, the waking mind reasserts structure, language returns, memory organizes itself. External reality becomes dominant again, but beneath this surface, the brain retains traces of nocturnal activity. Learning has been subtly adjusted. Emotional associations have been updated. Certain memories have been strengthened while others fade. The night leaves its imprint, even when the dream itself cannot be recalled. And so the cycle continues. Night after night, the mind enters this hidden state, sometimes vividly remembered, sometimes completely forgotten, but always present in the background of human existence. Across a lifetime, this becomes one of the most consistent experiences any person will ever have. More consistent than travel, more consistent than relationships, more consistent than most conscious routines. The mind returns again and again to dreaming, as if it is part of a deeper biological rhythm that cannot be interrupted without consequence. And yet, despite its universality, dreaming remains deeply personal. No two dreams are ever truly the same. Even when themes overlap, the emotional texture differs, the memory associations differ, the subtle atmosphere differs. Each dream is shaped by a lifetime of unique experience, filtered through a brain that belongs to one individual only. This makes dreaming one of the most private forms of existence, a hidden dimension of life that cannot be shared directly. It can only be described after the fact, imperfectly, through language that always falls slightly short of the experience itself. And perhaps that limitation is important, because dreams remind us that not everything meaningful in human life can be fully captured or explained. Some aspects of consciousness exist primarily to be experienced, not fully understood. As the final moments of this nighttime journey approach, the mind prepares once again for the boundary between sleep and waking to dissolve. Somewhere beneath the surface of awareness, neural rhythms begin shifting toward morning patterns. Light is still absent, but the direction has already changed. The dreaming brain slowly quiets, not because it is finished, but because it is preparing to return, and in that gentle transition, consciousness once again stands at the edge of two worlds, ready to wake into one while quietly carrying fragments of the other. And yet, even as waking consciousness returns, something subtle continues underneath it, like a tide that has not fully retreated. The brain does not simply switch states like a light turning on. It reorganizes itself gradually, rebuilding the architecture of attention, while remnants of dream logic still drift through the edges of thought. This is why early morning ideas sometimes feel strangely soft, as if they were shaped in a different language. The mind is still negotiating between two forms of reality, the one it constructed internally and the one it must now re-enter externally. In neuroscience, this transition is often described in terms of shifting network dominance. During deep sleep and REM states, internal processing systems take precedence, but as awakening progresses, executive networks in the prefrontal cortex regain control, restoring linear reasoning, planning, and self-awareness. What is fascinating is that neither state fully disappears during the other. Instead, they overlap in changing proportions, creating a continuum rather than a clean division. This overlap may be why creativity often appears in the boundary moments of sleep. Ideas that seem impossible during full waking focus can emerge effortlessly in the drifting space between sleep and alertness. The mind is still partially free from strict logical constraints, yet just coherent enough to retain fragments of insight. Many people report that solutions to problems appear not through deliberate effort, but through these transitional states, when the brain is relaxed enough to recombine information in unexpected ways, yet awake enough to notice the result. Dreaming, in this sense, is not isolated from waking cognition. It is part of a larger cycle of continuous mental reorganization. Even during full sleep, the brain is not disconnected from the world. It continues monitoring sounds, temperature, and bodily signals at a reduced level, filtering only what is necessary for survival. A sudden noise may be woven into a dream narrative rather than waking the sleeper. The brain incorporates external input into internal storytelling, preserving sleep while maintaining a thread of environmental awareness. This adaptability is part of what makes dreaming so stable across evolution. It is not a fragile escape from reality, but a flexible mode of processing reality under reduced external demand. And within this mode, different stages of dreaming appear to serve different functions. Non-REM sleep, often associated with slower brainwaves, tends to produce less vivid and more thought-like dreams, sometimes fragmented, sometimes abstract, like half-formed reflections. REM sleep, by contrast, is more immersive, emotionally rich, and perceptually detailed. The alternating rhythm between these stages throughout the night suggests a structured cycle of internal processing, each phase contributing differently to mental restoration. Some researchers propose that non-REM sleep may help stabilize memory traces, while REM sleep integrates them into broader emotional and associative networks. In simpler terms, one stage preserves information, while the other reshapes its meaning. Together, they form a kind of nightly dialogue within the brain, a conversation between stability and transformation. There is also a growing interest in how the brain decides what to keep and what to let fade. Not every memory is strengthened during sleep. Some are reinforced, others weakened, as if the brain is continuously editing the vast archive of experience. Dreams may reflect this process indirectly, sometimes revisiting emotionally significant events, while ignoring neutral details entirely. The sleeping mind appears less concerned with accuracy than with relevance. Relevance defined not by logic, but by emotion. This emotional weighting may explain why dreams often feel intensely personal even when their content is bizarre or unfamiliar. The feeling carries more truth than the structure. A dream may place someone in an impossible city, yet the emotional tone, fear, longing, relief, feels unmistakably real. That emotional realism is what lingers after waking, not the physical plausibility of events. And it is also what makes nightmares so powerful. Nightmares are not simply disturbing images. They are emotionally amplified simulations, often reflecting heightened stress or unresolved tension. The brain, in this state, may be rehearsing responses to perceived threats, even when those threats are symbolic rather than literal. Heart rate increases, stress hormones may rise, and the sleeper can experience genuine physiological reactions to entirely imagined scenarios. Yet even nightmares may serve a stabilizing role. By simulating distress in a safe environment, the brain may be testing emotional boundaries, exploring reactions, and preparing adaptive responses. In this sense, even unsettling dreams are part of a broader system of psychological regulation. Nothing in the dreaming brain appears entirely wasted. Every experience is processed, even if its purpose is not immediately clear. There are also rare and fascinating disruptions in this system that reveal its underlying structure more sharply. Sleep disorders such as narcolepsy can blur the boundaries between wakefulness and dreaming, causing REM-like experiences to intrude into waking consciousness. In these moments, dream imagery can appear while a person is technically awake, demonstrating how thin the separation between states can become when regulatory systems are altered. Similarly, in conditions like REM, sleep behavior disorder, the usual paralysis of the body during dreaming is reduced, allowing physical movement to accompany dream enactment. These cases highlight an important truth. The stillness of the sleeping body is not absence of activity, but controlled inhibition. The brain is highly active during sleep. It simply prevents that activity from being expressed physically. Dreaming, then, is not passive at all. It is carefully contained intensity. Across cultures, this hidden intensity has often been interpreted in symbolic or spiritual terms. Some traditions view dreams as bridges between worlds, others as reflections of the soul, and others still as messages encoded in symbolic language. Modern science reframes these interpretations in biological terms, yet the subjective experience that inspired them remains unchanged. The human mind, when dreaming, feels as though it is accessing something beyond ordinary perception. Not necessarily another realm, but another mode of existence. A mode where identity is fluid, time is elastic, and meaning is felt more than explained. This is why, even in an age of imaging technology and computational neuroscience, dreams still hold a quiet philosophical weight. They challenge the assumption that consciousness is always anchored to stable reality. Instead, they reveal that reality itself is experienced through a constantly shifting internal model. And that model can be rewritten every night. As sleep eventually gives way again to morning, the cycle closes but does not end. The mind carries forward its invisible adjustments, its emotional recalibrations, its forgotten narratives. Most of it will never be consciously remembered, yet it will still influence perception, mood, and thought in subtle ways throughout the day. And so the dreaming continues to matter, even when it is absent from memory. It is not a separate world we occasionally visit. It is a continuous process beneath awareness, shaping the texture of waking life itself. And tonight, as it has always done, it will begin again. As the day unfolds and waking life reasserts its structure, the memory of dreams continues to behave in a strangely selective way. Certain fragments return unexpectedly. An image without context, a sound without source, a brief emotional impression that arrives uninvited in the middle of ordinary thought. These remnants rarely form complete narratives. Instead, they appear like drifting debris from a vast internal ocean that is no longer visible, yet still subtly present beneath awareness. This partial recall is not a failure of memory, but a feature of how dreaming is stored. During sleep, the brain does not encode experience in the same structured way it does during wakefulness. The systems responsible for organizing episodic memory operate differently under altered neurochemical conditions. As a result, dreams are often recorded more as emotional impressions than as precise sequences. The mind remembers how something felt more reliably than what exactly happened, and because of this, dreams behave like memories without stable anchors. They can be revisited, but never perfectly reconstructed. Even when a person believes they remember a dream clearly, the act of retelling it subtly reshapes the experience. Each attempt to describe it imposes waking logic onto something that was not originally structured that way. Gaps are filled, transitions are smoothed, conflicting details are resolved. Over time, the dream becomes less like an event and more like a story about an event. This transformation is unavoidable. Language belongs to waking consciousness. Dreams do not. And yet humans have always tried to translate between the two. Across history, dream reports have been collected, interpreted, and compared in an attempt to find patterns. From ancient manuscripts to modern sleep laboratories, the same curiosity persists. What does the dreaming mind reveal about the waking mind? One of the most consistent findings is that dreams are deeply shaped by recent experience, but not in a literal way. The brain appears to sample fragments of recent days and weave them into older memories, emotional concerns, and symbolic associations. A brief conversation from the afternoon might reappear in a dream, but placed in an entirely different emotional context. A familiar location might be reconstructed with impossible architecture layered on top of it. The result is not repetition, it is recombination. This recombination may be one of the core functions of dreaming. Rather than replaying life, the brain appears to remix it. Elements of memory are reorganized in novel configurations, allowing relationships between experiences to be tested in ways that waking logic would not normally permit. A fear might be placed next to a safe environment. A memory might be altered just enough to reveal its emotional structure. A familiar situation might unfold under unfamiliar rules. In this sense, dreaming resembles a form of internal simulation. Not of reality as it is, but of reality as it could be experienced under different emotional conditions. And this simulation is not random. It is guided by the brain's constant effort to maintain coherence within a changing emotional landscape. Over time, this may help explain why dreams often cluster around certain themes during specific life periods. During times of stress, dreams may become more fragmented or urgent. During periods of stability, they may become calmer or more observational. During transitions, moving, loss, change, uncertainty, dreams often reflect instability in symbolic form. The dreaming mind does not ignore emotional change. It absorbs it completely. Even subtle shifts in mood across days can influence dream content. Yet the connection is rarely direct enough to allow simple interpretation. Instead, it appears filtered through layers of memory, association, and imagination, producing outputs that are indirect but emotionally aligned. This indirectness is what gives dreams their elusive quality. They feel meaningful, but not in a straightforward way. They hint rather than explain. And perhaps this is why humans continue to return to dreams for insight, even in scientific contexts. Not because dreams provide clear answers, but because they reflect something essential about how the mind organizes experience beneath conscious control. Modern sleep research has also revealed that dreaming is not confined to a single stage of sleep or even a single function. It appears to emerge from multiple overlapping processes occurring across different phases of the night. Some of these processes are deeply physiological, involving restoration of metabolic balance and neural recalibration. Others appear more cognitive, involving memory integration and emotional adjustment. Together, they form a complex system of maintenance that operates continuously while consciousness is suspended. But what remains most mysterious is not what the brain is doing during sleep, but why it experiences any of it as something at all. Why should internal neural activity be accompanied by vivid subjective awareness? Why does the brain not simply process information silently, without generating the sensation of being inside a world? Dreaming brings this question into sharper focus because it isolates experience from external reality entirely. There is no physical environment being perceived directly, yet perception continues. There is no sensory input constructing the world, yet a world appears. The mind generates both structure and the feeling of presence within that structure. This is the core mystery of consciousness itself, and dreaming does not solve it. It simply makes it visible in its most unfiltered form. There are moments, especially in deep REM sleep, when the dream feels so immersive that it becomes indistinguishable from waking life until it ends. Only afterward does the brain recognize the difference. This delayed recognition suggests that the sense of reality is not based on objective verification during experience, but on post-experience comparison. In other words, reality is confirmed after it is lived, not during it. This insight has led some researchers and philosophers to consider dreaming as a natural experiment in perception. By temporarily removing external input, the brain reveals how much of experience is internally generated at all times. Even waking perception relies heavily on predictive modeling, anticipating what should be seen, heard, or felt, then adjusting those predictions based on incoming signals. Dreaming simply removes the correction layer. What remains is pure construction. And yet, despite this construction, dreams rarely feel artificial while they occur. The sense of reality inside them is not weaker than waking life. It is simply different. It lacks external validation, but it possesses internal coherence. The dream feels real because the mind is fully engaged in maintaining it. Only awakening introduces doubt. Only comparison reveals the difference. This delayed recognition is part of what gives dreams their lingering psychological effect. Even when forgotten in detail, they can leave behind emotional traces that influence mood and perception. A difficult dream may subtly alter the tone of a morning without leaving any clear memory of why. A peaceful dream may produce calmness that feels unearned but persistent. The mind carries the atmosphere of its nighttime experiences into daylight, even when the narrative is lost. And so the influence of dreaming extends beyond memory into something more diffuse: emotional coloring, attentional bias, and subtle shifts in mental orientation. Nothing about this process is dramatic. It is quiet, gradual, almost invisible, and yet it happens every night, shaping the internal landscape of waking life in ways that science is still only beginning to map. As evening approaches once again, the conditions for dreaming begin to reassemble. The body prepares, temperature shifts, hormonal cycles adjust, attention begins to loosen from external demands, and slowly, without deliberate intention, consciousness approaches the same threshold it crossed countless times before. The boundary between worlds becomes thin again, not as a mystery to be solved, but as a rhythm to be entered. And tonight, as always, the mind will step back into that hidden continuity where experience continues without interruption, only transformation. There is something deeply ancient about that transformation. Long before artificial light extended human activity deep into the night, sleep arrived as an unavoidable part of existence. Darkness gathered gradually across forests, deserts, coastlines, and open plains, and with it came a slowing of movement across the living world. Fires dimmed, voices softened. The visible landscape disappeared beyond the reach of moonlight. For early humans, night was not merely the absence of day. It was an entirely different environment, governed by uncertainty, instinct, memory, and imagination. In that darkness, dreams may have felt inseparable from reality itself. Without electric illumination or constant stimulation, the boundary between waking and dreaming likely seemed far more fluid. The stars overhead appeared infinite. Strange sounds moved beyond the edge of sight. Sleep carried the mind into vivid internal worlds that could feel every bit as significant as daytime experience. A dream of danger might influence decisions the next morning. A dream of a lost loved one might feel like a genuine encounter. The emotional authority of dreams was difficult to ignore because the surrounding world already contained so much mystery. And perhaps in many ways, it still does. Modern life often creates the illusion that reality is fully mapped and understood. Satellites orbit the planet. Information moves instantly across continents. Neuroscience can monitor electrical activity inside the brain with astonishing precision. Yet every night, despite all technological advancement, human consciousness still enters states that remain partly beyond explanation. The mechanism can be measured, the experience cannot. This distinction matters because dreams remind people that subjective experience is not easily reduced to data alone. Brain scans may reveal activation patterns during REM sleep, but they do not capture the feeling of standing inside a dream while rain falls across an impossible city at dusk. They do not capture the emotional texture of hearing a forgotten voice speak again after many years. They do not capture the strange familiarity of landscapes that never existed. The inner world remains partly private, and perhaps that privacy is one of the last truly untouched spaces in modern life. Dreams belong entirely to the dreamer while they occur. They cannot be streamed, recorded perfectly, or shared directly. Even the most advanced imaging technologies cannot reconstruct a dream with complete fidelity. Scientists have made early progress decoding broad visual categories from brain activity during sleep, but the rich, subjective depth of dreaming remains inaccessible from the outside. There is still no doorway into another person's dream. Only description, only metaphor, only fragments translated imperfectly into language after waking. And because of this, dreams preserve something rare, a form of experience untouched by performance. In waking life, people constantly shape themselves for social environments. Expressions are moderated, thoughts are filtered, attention is divided across obligations and expectations. But dreams emerge before social editing can fully intervene. They are shaped by emotion, memory, instinct, and imagination operating more freely beneath conscious control. The dreaming mind is less concerned with reputation. It reveals emotional reality more directly, not always accurately, but honestly. This honesty can sometimes be uncomfortable. Dreams may expose fears a person prefers not to acknowledge while awake. They may reveal unresolved grief hidden beneath distraction. They may return repeatedly to emotional conflicts the conscious mind believes it has already moved beyond. Yet dreams can also reveal resilience. Many people report dreams that provide unexpected comfort during difficult periods of life. A reassuring conversation, a peaceful landscape, a sense of release from burdens carried during the day. These experiences may emerge from the brain's ongoing efforts to regulate emotion and maintain psychological balance during sleep. The mind is not only processing distress, it is also searching continuously for equilibrium. And perhaps this explains why sleep itself feels so restorative when uninterrupted and deep. During healthy sleep cycles, the brain and body enter coordinated states of repair and recalibration. Hormones regulating stress and growth shift across the night. Immune activity changes. Synaptic connections within the brain strengthen or weaken depending on recent experience. Even the spaces between brain cells subtly expand during deep sleep, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to circulate more efficiently and clear metabolic waste products that accumulate during waking activity. The sleeping brain is performing maintenance on an extraordinary scale, all while consciousness drifts through dreams above it. There is something quietly beautiful about that image. Beneath every dream, beneath every imagined landscape and emotional narrative, the body continues its patient biological work in darkness. Cells communicate, rhythms synchronize, systems restore themselves without conscious awareness. Human beings survive partly because they surrender control each night. And in a culture that often values constant productivity and alertness, sleep can appear deceptively passive. But biologically, sleep is among the most active and necessary states the body ever enters. To deprive the brain of dreaming and deep sleep is not merely to lose rest. It is to disrupt the delicate processes that stabilize emotion, cognition, memory, and perception itself. After prolonged sleep deprivation, reality begins to fracture, attention weakens, emotion becomes unstable, hallucinations may emerge. The mind loses its ability to maintain coherent experience when separated too long from restorative sleep. This reveals something profound. Dreaming is not an optional side effect of consciousness. It is woven into consciousness itself. Every human mind depends upon periodic withdrawal into altered states in order to remain psychologically whole. And perhaps this dependence carries philosophical significance as well. Modern culture often emphasizes conscious control, rational planning, and deliberate thought. Yet dreaming reminds us that some of the most important mental processes occur outside conscious awareness entirely. Memory integrates itself without permission. Emotion reorganizes itself without instruction. Creativity emerges unexpectedly from hidden associations. The deeper mind continues working quietly beneath the surface of deliberate thought. This hidden continuity may be why dreams sometimes feel wiser than waking consciousness, not because they possess supernatural knowledge, but because they arise from broader networks of association than conscious attention normally accesses. During the day, thought narrows around goals and immediate concerns. During dreams, those boundaries loosen, allowing distant memories, emotions, and symbolic patterns to intermingle more freely. The result can feel strangely insightful, not always logical, but emotionally revealing. There are dreams people carry for entire lifetimes because they seem to touch something essential about existence itself. A vast silence beneath unfamiliar stars, a feeling of infinite distance, a moment of overwhelming peace impossible to describe afterward. Such dreams often resist interpretation because their meaning is experiential rather than analytical. They are felt before they are understood, and perhaps some are never fully understood at all. That mystery may be part of their value. Not every meaningful human experience becomes clearer through explanation. Music, memory, grief, awe, love, beauty, these are not diminished by science, but neither are they exhausted by it. Dreams belong to this same category of experience, scientifically observable, biologically grounded, yet still emotionally and philosophically expansive. Late at night, when the world grows quieter and the mind begins softening toward sleep once again, people rarely think consciously about the extraordinary transition awaiting them. It feels ordinary because it happens every day, yet from another perspective, falling asleep is among the strangest acts in all of human life. Consciousness dissolves, reality disappears, dreams emerge, and for several hours, the mind wanders through invisible worlds entirely of its own creation before returning once more to morning light. Morning itself can feel almost unreal after deep dreaming. For a few quiet moments, the mind must reconstruct the ordinary world piece by piece. The ceiling becomes recognizable. The weight of the body returns. Memory reconnects with identity, location, and time. The dream recedes while waking reality gathers its familiar shape again. This reconstruction happens so quickly that most people never notice it, yet it reveals how much conscious experience depends on continuous mental assembly. The brain does not simply wake up, it rebuilds orientation. And perhaps this is why some dreams linger with unusual force after waking. The emotional systems activated during sleep do not immediately disappear when consciousness changes state. The body may still carry traces of the dream in heart rate, breathing, hormonal activity, or mood. A frightening dream can leave tension behind long after its images fade. A peaceful dream can create a lingering sense of calm that quietly shapes the atmosphere of the entire morning. Dreams are temporary, but their emotional influence is often not. Researchers studying emotional memory have found that sleep appears deeply involved in separating emotional intensity from informational content. In other words, the brain may gradually soften the emotional sharpness of experiences while preserving the memory itself. Some scientists suspect dreaming plays a role in this process by repeatedly reactivating emotional material under safe conditions during sleep. The mind revisits experience without external danger, a kind of quiet overnight rehearsal. This may help explain why difficult emotions sometimes become more manageable after a full night of sleep. The circumstances themselves may remain unchanged, yet the emotional relationship to them subtly shifts. Sleep does not erase pain or uncertainty, but it often reorganizes the mind's response to them, and dreams may be part of that reorganization, not as direct solutions, but as emotional processing unfolding beneath awareness. There is something deeply reassuring about this hidden labor of the mind. Even while people rest, consciousness continues caring for itself in ways impossible to observe directly. Neural pathways strengthen and weaken, hormonal cycles recalibrate, emotional patterns adjust, memories integrate into broader structures of meaning. The sleeping brain is not inactive, it is profoundly alive. This quiet activity becomes especially visible in infancy. Newborn humans spend extraordinary amounts of time asleep, and much of that sleep occurs in REM-like states associated with dreaming. Scientists believe this intense sleep activity may support the rapid formation of neural architecture during early development. The infant brain is absorbing enormous quantities of new information, and sleep appears essential for organizing it. In a sense, Dreams may accompany the construction of the self from the very beginning of life, even before language fully develops, even before stable autobiographical memory exists. The mind is already entering cycles of internal simulation and neural reorganization in darkness. And at the opposite end of life, sleep and dreaming often take on different emotional meanings. Elderly individuals sometimes describe dreams that feel unusually vivid or reflective, filled with memories from distant decades. Childhood homes reappear, forgotten faces return. Entire eras of life resurface with surprising clarity. Memory, during dreams, does not follow chronological order. The brain can access emotional material from across a lifetime simultaneously. A person in old age may dream with the emotional immediacy of youth because the dreaming mind operates differently from waking identity. Time inside dreams becomes layered rather than linear. Past and present coexist fluidly. Perhaps this is one reason dreams often feel timeless, not eternal exactly, but detached from ordinary sequence. And within this timelessness, consciousness sometimes produces moments of extraordinary emotional clarity. A dream may compress years of feeling into a single image or interaction. A brief scene may contain emotional complexity impossible to explain afterward. These moments often remain memorable not because they were visually spectacular, but because they felt deeply true in some difficult-to-define way. Dreams can occasionally reveal emotional knowledge before conscious thought catches up. A relationship feels distant in a dream before waking awareness fully admits it. Anxiety appears symbolically before it is consciously acknowledged. Hope emerges quietly in dream imagery before a person allows themselves to feel optimistic while awake. The dreaming mind often notices emotional currents early because it is less distracted by deliberate thought. It listens differently. This does not mean dreams predict the future in a supernatural sense. Rather, they may reflect subtle emotional information already present beneath conscious attention. The brain continuously gathers signals from behavior, memory, mood, and perception, many of which never fully enter deliberate awareness during the day. Dreams sometimes reorganize those signals into emotionally recognizable forms. The result can feel strangely prophetic, even when it is deeply psychological. And because dreams operate through emotion and symbolism rather than literal logic, they often retain a quality of mystery even after scientific explanation is applied. Knowing the neurological mechanisms behind music does not eliminate the emotional power of hearing it. Similarly, understanding REM sleep does not diminish the strange beauty of dreaming itself. Science explains processes. Experience gives them meaning. The two are not opposites. They are different lenses looking toward the same phenomenon. In recent decades, advances in neuroscience have revealed increasingly detailed pictures of what occurs inside the sleeping brain. Researchers can now observe oscillating neural rhythms, identify sleep stage transitions, and map broad patterns of activation during dreams. Artificial intelligence systems have even begun exploring rough reconstruction of visual imagery from brain data under limited experimental conditions. Yet despite all this progress, the central mystery remains untouched. Why should electrical activity produce subjective experience at all? Why should patterns of neurons create the feeling of standing inside a dream world beneath a night sky? Hearing wind move through invisible trees. The hard problem of consciousness, as philosophers sometimes call it, becomes especially vivid when considering dreams because dreams contain experience without external reality. They demonstrate that the mind can generate complete experiential worlds internally. And if consciousness can construct reality so convincingly during sleep, it raises profound questions about perception during waking life as well. How much of ordinary experience is also constructed? How much of reality is interpretation layered upon sensation? Neuroscience increasingly suggests that the brain operates less like a passive camera and more like a prediction engine, constantly generating models of reality and updating them based on incoming information. Waking perception itself may be a controlled form of hallucination, constrained by sensory input. Dreaming simply removes the external constraints. The mind continues generating reality, but now from memory, emotion, expectation, and imagination alone. This realization can feel unsettling at first, but it can also feel deeply calming. because it reveals how creative consciousness truly is. Every human mind contains the ability to generate entire worlds in darkness. Vast emotional landscapes emerge nightly from networks of cells weighing little more than a few pounds inside the skull. Dreams demonstrate extraordinary imaginative capacity occurring naturally, automatically, and continuously across human life. And perhaps this quiet miracle has become too familiar to fully appreciate. People speak casually of having dreams, as though the experience were ordinary. Yet from another perspective, dreaming is astonishing. An unconscious brain invents immersive realities populated by characters, architecture, movement, weather, language, memory, fear, beauty, and emotion, all without external instruction, night after night, year after year, for an entire lifetime. And tonight, somewhere beyond the reach of waking attention, those hidden worlds are already waiting to return once more. As evening settles across the planet once again, billions of minds begin drifting toward that familiar threshold almost unconsciously. Lights dim in apartment windows, conversations soften into silence. The final movements of the day grow slower and quieter. Somewhere, rain taps gently against glass while distant traffic fades into the background hum of the night. Elsewhere, wind moves through trees beneath a dark sky filled with stars invisible to most sleeping cities. And within countless bedrooms, consciousness prepares once again to loosen its hold on the waking world. There is a remarkable vulnerability in this nightly ritual. To sleep is to release control temporarily. The carefully maintained structure of waking identity begins to soften. Responsibilities pause. Attention withdraws from the external world. The body becomes still, while awareness slowly descends into altered states, shaped by rhythms older than civilization itself. No matter how advanced human society becomes, this ancient biological cycle remains unchanged. Every person, regardless of status or culture, eventually closes their eyes and enters darkness. And in that darkness, dreams wait. Some arrive quietly, almost unnoticed. Fleeting images drift through the edges of consciousness before dissolving into deeper sleep. Others unfold with startling clarity from the very beginning, immersing the dreamer in environments so vivid they feel more remembered than invented. A train station glowing beneath pale morning light, an endless ocean without waves, a staircase descending into silence. Dreams often begin in places that feel strangely familiar even when they have never existed. This sensation of familiarity is one of the most curious aspects of dreaming. The brain can generate environments that carry deep emotional recognition without corresponding to any actual location. Neuroscientists suspect this may result from the blending of memory fragments into new configurations. The architecture of one place merges with the emotional atmosphere of another. Pieces of experience overlap until something entirely new emerges, yet still feels known. The dreaming mind builds emotional reality before physical reality. A place feels familiar first. Details come afterward. This is why dream landscapes often resist precise description after waking. Their coherence depends less on consistent geography than on emotional continuity. Rooms change shape, distances shift. Buildings contain impossible interiors larger than their exteriors should allow. Yet inside the dream, these contradictions rarely matter. The emotional logic remains intact even when physical logic dissolves. And perhaps this reveals something deeper about how human consciousness operates in general. Emotion is not separate from perception. It helps organize perception. Fear sharpens attention. Comfort softens it. Loneliness alters the atmosphere of space itself. The waking mind often hides these influences beneath stable sensory input, but dreams expose them openly. The architecture of dreams is emotional architecture. In this sense, dreams may resemble ancient forms of storytelling more than modern realism. Myths, legends, and symbolic narratives across cultures often operate according to emotional truth rather than literal probability. Mountains speak. Time loops. Gods change shape. Journeys represent inner transformation rather than physical travel. Dreams move through similar territory, not because they are primitive, but because they emerge from layers of the mind older than analytical language. The emotional brain evolved long before abstract reasoning. Deep neural systems related to fear, attachment, reward, and survival shaped human experience for millions of years before complex rational thought appeared. During dreaming, some of these older systems become more prominent again, allowing experience to unfold in ways that feel primal, symbolic, and deeply intuitive. This may explain why dreams can feel emotionally significant, even when they are impossible to explain logically. A person wakes with certainty that a dream mattered, though they cannot fully articulate why. The meaning exists more as atmosphere than statement, more as sensation than conclusion. And perhaps this is one reason dreams continue inspiring art, religion, philosophy, and psychology alike. They remind people that human consciousness cannot be reduced entirely to rational analysis. Beneath deliberate thought exists a vast emotional and imaginative landscape operating continuously beyond awareness. Modern neuroscience increasingly supports this idea. Much of the brain's activity occurs outside conscious control. Decisions begin forming before people become aware of making them. Emotional responses shape cognition before reasoning catches up. Memory itself is selective, reconstructive, and influenced by feeling. The conscious self, powerful as it seems, is only part of the larger system. Dreams reveal the rest. They allow hidden associations to surface, not as organized explanations, but as lived experiences. A single dream may connect memories separated by decades. Childhood emotions may blend seamlessly with present concerns. Faces merge, locations transform, identity itself becomes fluid. And still, through all this instability, a sense of self usually persists inside the dream. Someone is experiencing it. Someone is afraid, curious, joyful, lost, or searching. That persistent sense of subjective presence may be the deepest mystery of all. Scientists can map neural activity with increasing precision, yet the existence of subjective experience, the feeling of being someone, remains profoundly difficult to explain. Why should electrical patterns inside the brain produce awareness at all? Why should neural computation feel like anything from the inside? Dreams sharpen this mystery because they demonstrate that consciousness does not require the external world in order to generate lived reality. The mind can create entire experiential universes internally, and for the dreamer, those universes are temporarily real. Perhaps nowhere is this more visible than in lucid dreaming. When awareness emerges within a dream, the experience can become astonishingly vivid. Some lucid dreamers describe looking closely at dream objects and noticing intricate detail, reflections in water, textures on walls, distant landscapes illuminated by impossible light. The brain is generating these experiences spontaneously in real time, not from external perception, but from internal simulation. This ability suggests extraordinary computational richness within the sleeping mind. Vast sensory worlds are assembled seamlessly from memory, prediction, imagination, and emotional association, all while the body lies motionless in darkness. And still, most people awaken and move through the next day without fully considering the strangeness of what occurred overnight. Perhaps familiarity hides the mystery. Dreaming feels ordinary only because it happens constantly. But if a person encountered dreaming for the first time as an adult, if they had never slept before, the experience would likely seem almost unimaginable. A state in which consciousness disconnects from physical reality, enters immersive, internally generated worlds, experiences emotion and narrative with complete conviction, then forgets most of it by morning. It would sound less like biology and more like mythology, yet it happens every night, quietly, reliably, across the entire human species. And maybe there is comfort in that universality. Every person who has ever lived has crossed this threshold between waking and dreaming. Ancient sailors sleeping beneath unfamiliar constellations, children in small villages centuries ago. Scientists, artists, laborers, emperors, across all differences of history and culture, humanity shares this same hidden nightly journey, a collective migration inward, toward memory, toward emotion, toward imagination, toward the mysterious landscapes waiting silently beneath consciousness itself. And somewhere, at this very moment, while one part of the world wakes beneath pale morning skies, another part is already beginning to dream again. In hospitals glowing softly through the night, exhausted nurses pause briefly between footsteps while patients drift in and out of uneasy sleep. In quiet suburban homes, children dream beneath blankets covered in stars or animals or faded cartoon patterns. On ships crossing dark oceans, sleepers sway gently with the rhythm of unseen waves. In crowded cities, millions rest only a few feet apart, while inhabiting entirely separate realities behind closed eyes. Every dream is solitary, yet dreaming itself is universal. This strange combination of isolation and shared experience gives sleep a deeply human quality. No one can enter another person's dream directly, and yet every mind participates in the same nightly surrender to unconsciousness. People awaken carrying fragments of invisible journeys no one else witnessed. A sense of awe, a lingering fear, a half-forgotten conversation, an impossible landscape already dissolving into memory. By breakfast, most of it is gone, and still, the process continues night after night, with astonishing consistency. There are even cultures in which dreams are discussed as naturally as weather. Some indigenous communities have historically treated dreams as important communal experiences, sharing them each morning as part of emotional and spiritual life. Certain societies viewed dreams as sources of guidance, social insight, or collective meaning rather than private curiosities. Modern industrial life often leaves less space for this kind of reflection. Alarms interrupt sleep abruptly. Schedules demand immediate attention. Phones illuminate beside the bed within moments of waking. The mind is pulled quickly outward again, away from the quiet inward atmosphere of dreams. Yet even in modern life, many people still sense that dreams contain something emotionally significant, not necessarily hidden prophecies or mystical truths, but traces of the deeper self moving beneath daily consciousness. This deeper movement becomes especially visible during periods of emotional transition. Grief, love, uncertainty, major life change. These experiences often reshape dreaming patterns dramatically. People going through profound emotional events frequently report more vivid, memorable, or emotionally intense dreams, as though the sleeping mind becomes more active when waking identity itself is changing. Perhaps this happens because dreams help maintain psychological continuity during instability. The brain is constantly trying to integrate new emotional realities into the existing structure of the self. During sleep, that integration continues without distraction. Old memories combine with new emotions. Fear mixes with hope. The mind experiments with symbolic scenarios, searching quietly for balance. Dreams do not solve life, but they may help consciousness adapt to it. And adaptation is one of the defining characteristics of the human brain. Neuroscientists often describe the brain as a predictive organ, continuously generating expectations about the world in order to navigate it efficiently. During waking life, these predictions are constrained and corrected by sensory input. During dreaming, however, the predictive machinery continues operating without external correction. The result is a free-flowing reality simulation driven largely by internal emotion and memory. Dreams may therefore reveal the brain's underlying tendency to generate narratives constantly. Human consciousness appears deeply story-oriented. Even random events are quickly organized into patterns of meaning. The waking mind constructs identity itself through narrative continuity. Memories arranged into the story of a person moving through time. Dreams loosen this continuity without fully destroying it. The self becomes more fluid, yet some narrative center remains. A dreamer still experiences events as happening to someone, even when identity shifts in strange ways. People may become younger, older, different versions of themselves, or even observers outside their own bodies. Yet awareness persists through the transformation. This persistence raises fascinating philosophical questions. What exactly is the self? If identity can shift so dramatically during dreams, while consciousness remains continuous? Is the self a stable entity, or is it a constantly reconstructed process held together by memory and perception? Dreams suggest the latter may be closer to the truth. The mind rebuilds reality and identity continuously, even during waking life. Sleep simply reveals how flexible those constructions truly are, and perhaps this flexibility is not a flaw, but a strength. Human beings survive partly because consciousness can adapt to changing emotional and environmental conditions. Dreams may provide a safe space for mental flexibility itself, a nightly rehearsal in transformation, uncertainty, and emotional navigation. Within dreams, people practice being many versions of themselves: afraid, curious, powerless, free, lost, at peace. The dreaming mind explores emotional states the waking self may rarely encounter directly. And through this exploration, consciousness expands its capacity for experience. There are moments in certain dreams that feel almost impossibly beautiful. Vast skies above silent landscapes, warm sunlight moving through unfamiliar rooms, music that seems emotionally overwhelming despite disappearing completely upon waking. Some dreamers describe colors more vivid than waking perception, or environments carrying an indescribable sense of meaning and tranquility. Neuroscience can explain pieces of these experiences through activation of visual and emotional systems, but explanation does not reduce their impact. Beauty remains beauty even when understood biologically. Awe does not disappear simply because neurons participate in it. In fact, scientific understanding often deepens the wonder. The realization that billions of neurons, communicating through electrochemical patterns in darkness, can generate experiences of such emotional richness is extraordinary in itself. Inside the sleeping brain, matter becomes imagination, electrical activity becomes worlds, and perhaps dreams remind people that consciousness is not merely functional, it is also creative. The human mind does not only calculate and survive, it invents, it symbolizes, it transforms experience into narrative, atmosphere, and meaning even while unconscious. This creativity may emerge most clearly in children's dreams. Young children often experience especially fluid dream logic because their waking models of reality are still developing. Imagination and perception overlap more easily. Monsters hide beneath beds. Toys seem alive. Dream worlds blend seamlessly with waking fantasy. As adulthood progresses, waking logic strengthens, routines stabilize, and social structures become more rigid. Yet dreams continue preserving some part of that original imaginative freedom. They allow the mind to temporarily escape the fixed rules necessary for daytime functioning. In dreams, possibility expands again, and perhaps this expansion serves an important emotional purpose. Human life can become heavily structured around repetition, responsibility, and external expectation. Dreaming interrupts that structure nightly. It reminds the mind that reality is not experienced mechanically, but subjectively. Every person carries an immense inner world invisible to others. Dreams illuminate that hidden interior briefly before morning returns. And still, despite all the mystery surrounding dreams, one quiet truth remains constant across science, philosophy, and history alike. Sleep is essential. Without it, emotional stability weakens, memory deteriorates, perception becomes unreliable. The dreaming mind is not separate from mental health. It is deeply connected to it. To dream is not to escape life. It is part of how the mind sustains life. Each night, consciousness withdraws inward, not to abandon reality, but to restore its ability to meet reality again tomorrow. And somewhere beneath the surface of sleep, while cities grow silent and stars move slowly overhead, the human mind continues its ancient work in darkness, remembering, reshaping, imagining, healing, and dreaming once more. There is a certain stillness that belongs only to the middle of the night, not the energetic darkness of evening, when conversations still drift through windows and lights remain awake across the city, but the deeper silence that arrives hours later, when most of the world has surrendered fully to sleep. Streets empty, machines quiet, entire neighborhoods seem suspended in a softer rhythm, and somewhere within that immense collective silence, millions of dreaming minds continue moving through invisible worlds entirely hidden from one another. It is strange to imagine, behind every darkened window, consciousness may be wandering somewhere else completely. One person revisits childhood, another crosses impossible landscapes, someone else speaks with the dead, flies above oceans, or searches endlessly through unfamiliar hallways, and all of it unfolds silently behind closed eyelids, while the physical world remains still. Perhaps this is why dreams often feel intimate in a way waking experiences rarely do. During the day, attention is fragmented outward toward tasks, communication, and external demands. But dreams emerge from inwardness. They are built from private memory, hidden fears, unnoticed desires, emotional residues too subtle for ordinary awareness. The dreaming mind turns inward and begins speaking in symbols, and those symbols often reveal emotional truths more honestly than waking language can. A person may insist during the day that they feel calm, yet dream repeatedly of storms, collapsing buildings, or endless pursuit. Another may consciously believe they have forgotten someone entirely, only to encounter them vividly in dreams years later. The sleeping mind continues carrying emotional material long after waking attention has moved elsewhere. Memory, after all, is not stored only as information. It is stored emotionally. The brain remembers not just events, but how those events felt. Certain smells instantly revive forgotten years because emotion and memory are deeply intertwined within the nervous system. Dreams appear to move through these emotional networks freely, connecting distant experiences through shared feeling rather than chronology. This is why dreams can collapse decades into moments. A person may stand simultaneously inside adulthood and childhood without noticing any contradiction. An old-school hallway may lead directly into a modern apartment. Time layers itself emotionally rather than sequentially, and perhaps waking memory functions more similarly than people realize. Human beings often imagine memory as an archive, preserving objective recordings of the past. But neuroscience increasingly suggests memory is reconstructive. Each recollection is partly rebuilt in the present, influenced by current emotion and perspective. Dreams simply expose this reconstructive nature more openly. They reveal the fluidity hidden beneath the apparent solidity of consciousness. There is also something profoundly cinematic about the sensory atmosphere of dreams. Light behaves differently. Sounds carry unusual emotional weight. Distances feel psychologically charged. A quiet room in a dream can feel enormous with loneliness. A crowded dream city can feel strangely silent despite movement everywhere. The emotional tone shapes sensory experience directly. And because the visual cortex remains highly active during REM sleep, dream imagery can become astonishingly detailed. Faces appear instantly recognizable. Landscapes unfold with immense scale. The brain generates shadows, reflections, textures, weather, and movement continuously in real time, all without external sensory input. The sleeping mind becomes a complete reality engine. This fact alone remains extraordinary when considered carefully. Inside darkness and silence, the human brain spontaneously constructs immersive worlds with narrative continuity, emotional depth, and sensory realism. Entire environments emerge from networks of neurons exchanging electrical signals within the skull. Matter creates experience, and experience creates meaning. Perhaps nowhere does this become more emotionally powerful than in dreams involving reunion. Many people describe dreams where they encounter someone lost to death, distance, or time. Often these dreams feel unusually calm compared to ordinary dreams. Conversations are simple, settings are peaceful. The emotional impact can remain long after waking. Science explains these experiences through memory and attachment systems reactivating during sleep. Yet, explanation does not diminish their emotional significance. The brain carries deep relational patterns throughout life. Love, grief, attachment, longing. These become physically embedded within neural architecture over years of experience. Dreams can temporarily reactivate those living emotional maps. In this way, dreaming reveals that absence is never entirely empty. The mind continues carrying traces of people long after physical separation begins. Voices remain encoded, gestures remain encoded, Emotional familiarity remains encoded, and during sleep, those fragments sometimes gather themselves briefly into presence again. There is something deeply human in that phenomenon, not supernatural, but profoundly emotional. Dreams remind people that consciousness is shaped not only by logic, but by relationship, memory, and feeling extending across time. Researchers studying sleep have also observed an intriguing phenomenon known as dream incorporation, in which external sounds or sensations become woven directly into dream narratives. A distant alarm may transform into church bells inside a dream. Rain against a window becomes ocean waves. The brain integrates sensory information seamlessly into ongoing internal stories. This adaptability demonstrates how actively the sleeping mind protects continuity of experience. The dream reorganizes itself around incoming stimuli, rather than collapsing immediately. In a sense, consciousness is always trying to preserve narrative coherence, even during sleep. This tendency toward coherence may be deeply connected to psychological stability itself. Human beings seem naturally driven to organize experience into understandable patterns. Dreams participate in this ongoing organization process, though in symbolic and emotional forms, rather than logical analysis. And perhaps this is why completely dreamless sleep can feel strangely empty when compared to nights filled with vivid dreaming. Even if the dreams themselves are forgotten, many people sense the difference emotionally upon waking. Certain mornings feel internally rich, textured by unseen mental activity during the night. The mind has traveled somewhere, even if no clear memory remains. This hidden continuity between waking and dreaming suggests that consciousness may be less fragmented than it first appears. Rather than separate compartments, waking thought and dreaming may represent different modes within the same ongoing mental process. The brain never truly stops constructing experience. It simply changes methods depending on state, environment, and biological rhythm. During the day, external reality dominates. At night, internal reality expands. Both are forms of consciousness shaped by the same underlying mind. And throughout human history, people have sensed this continuity intuitively. Dreams appear constantly in literature, religion, philosophy, and myth, because they feel connected to larger questions about identity and existence. What is real? What is the self? Where do thoughts come from? Why does consciousness exist at all? Dreams do not answer these questions directly, but they make them impossible to ignore. Every night, the mind demonstrates its ability to generate entire worlds from darkness alone. It creates stories, emotions, environments, and identities with astonishing creative power. Then, by morning, most of it vanishes almost completely. Temporary universes appearing and disappearing inside the human brain. Perhaps there is something quietly comforting in their impermanence. Dreams remind people that experience itself is fluid. Emotions change, fear fades, identity evolves. Even the most vivid dream dissolves eventually into memory, and then into silence, like clouds crossing a night sky, like waves rising and disappearing into the sea. And still, tomorrow night, the dreaming mind will begin again, patiently, invisibly, continuing its ancient rhythm beneath the surface of waking life. For most of human history, people awoke from dreams into darkness rather than daylight. Before industrial schedules divided sleep into rigid blocks, many cultures experienced the night differently. Historical records suggest that in parts of medieval Europe and elsewhere, people often slept in two segments, a first sleep and a second sleep, separated by a quiet waking interval sometime after midnight. During these silent hours, individuals might reflect on dreams, pray, speak softly with family members, or simply sit awake beneath candlelight before drifting back into sleep once more. The boundary between dreaming and waking may once have felt slower, softer, less abrupt than it often does today. Modern life tends to compress and accelerate these transitions. Alarms interrupt sleep suddenly. Artificial light confuses circadian rhythms. Screens fill the mind with stimulation until moments before rest. Yet beneath these modern conditions, the ancient biology of dreaming remains unchanged. The brain still cycles through darkness in rhythms shaped by evolution, memory, emotion, and time. And perhaps this persistence explains why dreams continue feeling strangely timeless. A person living in a modern skyscraper may dream with emotional patterns remarkably similar to someone who slept beside a fire thousands of years ago. Fear of falling, searching for shelter, returning home, losing direction, encountering loved ones. The settings change across centuries, but many emotional structures remain deeply recognizable. Dreams reveal continuity beneath history itself. The human nervous system still carries ancient instincts and emotional architectures formed long before modern civilization appeared. During waking life, technology surrounds those instincts with complexity and distraction. During dreams, however, consciousness often returns to simpler emotional landscapes. Danger, belonging, isolation, movement, memory, wonder. This may be why dream imagery frequently feels archetypal. Forests, water, roads, houses, sky, doors. These recurring symbols appear across cultures because they connect to deeply rooted structures of human experience. A doorway naturally suggests transition. Water suggests uncertainty, depth, emotion, or change. Endless roads evoke movement through life itself. The dreaming mind gravitates toward emotionally resonant imagery rather than abstract explanation. And unlike waking thought, dreams rarely separate intellect from emotion cleanly. Feeling and perception become fused together. A location is frightening, not merely because of what is visible there, but because fear itself reshapes the atmosphere of the environment. Likewise, peaceful dreams often carry a sense of lightness, difficult to reproduce in waking life, not because the scenery alone is beautiful, but because emotion saturates the entire experience. The dream does not simply contain emotion. It is built from emotion. This emotional construction becomes especially visible in recurring dreams. Some people revisit the same dream locations for years or even decades, an unfamiliar city that somehow feels known, a school that contains impossible architecture, a coastline appearing again and again throughout life. These places often evolve slowly over time, almost like persistent internal worlds maintained somewhere beneath conscious awareness. No one fully understands why the brain returns repeatedly to certain dream environments, but their persistence suggests that dreams are not random noise. They reflect organized patterns within the emotional and memory systems of the mind. In recent years, neuroscientists studying large-scale brain activity have become increasingly interested in how the sleeping brain balances stability and flexibility simultaneously. Consciousness must remain stable enough to preserve identity and psychological continuity, yet flexible enough to adapt, learn, and reorganize emotional experience. Dreaming may play a central role in maintaining that balance. Too much rigidity would leave the mind unable to adapt. Too much instability would fracture coherent identity. Dreams exist somewhere between these extremes, structured enough to feel immersive, fluid enough to allow transformation. And transformation is everywhere inside dreams. People become younger. Buildings reshape themselves. Seasons change instantly. The dead return. Time folds inward. Distances collapse. Identity loosens without disappearing entirely. The dreaming mind seems deeply comfortable with metamorphosis in ways waking consciousness often resists. Perhaps because the sleeping brain is not trying to preserve external order. It is exploring internal possibility. There is something profoundly creative in that process. Creativity itself may depend partly on the brain's ability to loosen fixed associations temporarily. During dreams, unusual connections form naturally. Separate memories combine unexpectedly. New emotional relationships emerge between previously unrelated experiences. This may help explain why solutions to difficult problems sometimes appear after sleep. The mind continues reorganizing information beneath awareness, free from the narrow focus of deliberate concentration. A problem that felt impossible during the day may seem suddenly clearer in the morning, not because the brain stopped working overnight, but because it never stopped working at all. The unconscious mind remains active continuously. Dreams are simply the visible surface of that hidden activity. And still, despite all scientific progress, there remains something impossible to fully measure about the subjective atmosphere of dreaming. Science can describe mechanisms beautifully, but mechanisms alone do not capture experience. Knowing how music is processed in the auditory cortex does not reproduce the feeling of hearing a distant melody at night. Likewise, mapping REM sleep does not fully explain the emotional texture of standing inside a dream beneath unfamiliar stars. Experience always contains an interior dimension beyond external observation. Dreams make this especially obvious because they are entirely private realities. No person can fully prove what they dreamed. No one else can enter the experience directly. The dream exists completely within subjective consciousness while it unfolds, then often disappears before it can be communicated clearly afterward. Perhaps this fragility is part of their beauty. Dreams resist permanence. They appear, transform, and dissolve like weather moving across the mind. And maybe human consciousness itself behaves similarly. Waking identity often feels solid and continuous, yet neuroscience increasingly suggests the self is dynamic rather than fixed. Thoughts change constantly. Emotional states fluctuate. Memories reconstruct themselves over time. The brain continuously updates its internal model of both self and world. Dreams simply reveal this fluidity more dramatically. In sleep, the mind becomes visibly processual, a continuous unfolding rather than a static entity. And there can be something deeply calming in recognizing that. Much of human suffering comes from the desire for permanence, permanent certainty, permanent identity, permanent emotional states. Dreams quietly demonstrate that consciousness is movement by nature. Fear changes into calm, confusion changes into understanding. One landscape dissolves into another, endlessly through the night. Nothing remains fixed for long, not even within the mind itself. Perhaps this is why certain dreams leave behind a feeling of peace difficult to explain logically. The dream may contain no clear message, no dramatic revelation, and yet waking from it feels restorative on a deeper emotional level. The mind has moved through symbolic spaces, released tension, reorganized emotion, and returned lighter somehow, not solved, but softened. And maybe that is enough. As midnight deepens and another cycle of dreaming begins somewhere in the world, countless sleepers once again drift into these hidden internal landscapes. Some dreams will be forgotten instantly, others will linger for years. Most will leave only faint emotional traces by morning. Yet together they form one of the largest unseen experiences in human life, an endless ocean of private worlds rising and disappearing each night beneath the surface of civilization itself, quietly, continuously, dream by dream. If it were possible to gather every dream dreamed in a single night across the earth, the result would likely feel less like a collection of stories and more like a vast shifting atmosphere of human emotion. Fear and wonder, memory and longing, anxiety and beauty. Billions of private experiences unfolding simultaneously in darkness, each one generated inside a different mind, each one vanishing almost as soon as it appears. And yet, despite their fragility, dreams may shape waking life more than people realize, not always dramatically, often subtly. A slight emotional shift after waking, a renewed memory of someone forgotten, a vague intuition difficult to explain. The mind carries traces of sleep into the day continuously, even when dreams themselves cannot be recalled. Researchers studying emotional regulation increasingly suspect that dreaming contributes to psychological balance in ways far deeper than conscious memory alone can measure. The sleeping brain appears to reorganize emotional experience quietly beneath awareness. And because this process is mostly invisible, people often underestimate how much inner work occurs during the night. While the conscious self rests, networks throughout the brain continue exchanging information, replaying experiences, strengthening certain pathways while weakening others. Sleep is not a pause in mental life. It is one of the most active periods of mental life. This becomes especially clear when sleep is disrupted. Chronic sleep deprivation affects not only attention and memory, but emotional resilience itself. Irritability increases, anxiety intensifies, perception becomes distorted, even social interactions change subtly, as exhausted brains struggle to interpret emotional signals accurately. Without proper sleep, the mind loses flexibility, thought becomes more rigid, emotion becomes harder to regulate, and reality itself can begin feeling strangely unreal after prolonged exhaustion. Hallucinations may emerge, time perception shifts, the boundary between imagination and external perception grows unstable. In extreme cases, people deprived of sleep long enough begin experiencing dreamlike intrusions while fully awake. This overlap reveals something essential. Dreaming is not separate from consciousness. It is deeply woven into the architecture of consciousness itself. The brain requires periodic movement into altered states in order to sustain coherent waking experience. Sleep and dreams are not interruptions to awareness. They are part of the continuous cycle that makes awareness possible. And perhaps this continuous cycle explains why dreams often carry such emotional resonance. Dreams emerge from the same mind that navigates waking life. The same memories, fears, attachments, and desires move through both states, simply organized differently. During the day, external reality anchors consciousness firmly. At night, internal emotional reality becomes more visible. Neither state is entirely separate from the other. The mind flows continuously between them. There are moments in dreams when this continuity becomes startlingly clear. A person realizes, suddenly and deeply, that the emotions inside the dream are connected directly to waking life, not symbolically in some abstract sense, but personally. A hidden grief surfaces, a fear becomes visible, a longing returns unexpectedly after years of silence. The dream reveals emotional truths already present beneath awareness, and often it does so gently, not through explanation, but through atmosphere. The emotional atmosphere of dreams is perhaps their most difficult quality to describe. Two dreams may contain similar events while feeling completely different emotionally. One version of an empty street may feel peaceful, another may feel unbearably lonely. The physical imagery matters less than the emotional field surrounding it. This mirrors waking life more closely than people often notice. Human beings do not experience reality objectively. Emotion constantly shapes perception. A familiar room feels different during grief than during happiness. Weather feels different during anxiety than during calm. Consciousness colors the world continuously. Dreams simply externalize this process openly. The inner emotional landscape becomes visible as environment itself. Perhaps that is why dream worlds can feel so strangely personal. Even when their details are unfamiliar, they are emotionally tailored to the dreamer with extraordinary precision. The dream understands what the conscious mind sometimes struggles to admit. It responds to hidden tension, unresolved memory, quiet desire, unspoken fear, and because dreams arise without deliberate control, they often bypass the narratives people construct about themselves during the day. The waking self tends to simplify identity into manageable stories: who we believe we are, what we think matters, what we tell ourselves about our lives. Dreams complicate those stories again. They remind people that the mind is larger than its conscious self-description. Within every person exists a vast interior territory, rarely explored directly while awake. This territory contains forgotten memories, emotional patterns, instinctive reactions, symbolic associations accumulated across a lifetime. Much of it operates silently beneath awareness, influencing behavior and perception continuously. Dreams illuminate fragments of this hidden terrain for a few hours each night before morning obscures it again, and perhaps there is wisdom in that rhythm. If the entire unconscious mind remained exposed constantly, ordinary functioning might become impossible. The brain filters experience carefully during waking life in order to maintain stability and focus. Dreams allow temporary access to deeper layers of emotional and imaginative processing without permanently overwhelming conscious awareness. A controlled descent into inner complexity, then a return. This rhythmic movement inward and outward may be fundamental to psychological health itself. Human beings require engagement with the external world, relationships, work, movement, survival, but they also require periods of inward integration. Dreams provide one of the most ancient and universal forms of that inward movement. Every night, Consciousness withdraws partially from external reality and enters internal reality instead, not to escape life, but to metabolize it, and in a world increasingly dominated by constant stimulation, this hidden inward process may matter more than ever. Modern attention is fragmented continuously by information streams, notifications, artificial light, and perpetual distraction. The mind rarely experiences true stillness during waking hours anymore. Yet sleep remains one of the few unavoidable retreats from external noise, and within sleep, dreams continue their ancient work, untouched by technology's pace. The dreaming brain does not care about productivity. It cares about emotional organization, memory integration, restoration, adaptation. Its rhythms remain biological, evolutionary, deeply human. Perhaps this is one reason dreams often feel timeless compared to waking life. The emotional systems generating dreams evolved long before modern civilization. Deep beneath contemporary culture, the human nervous system still responds to darkness, safety, separation, attachment, uncertainty, and wonder, much as it always has. Dreams emerge from those older layers of mind, layers shaped by countless generations beneath night skies stretching far beyond electric light. And maybe that is why certain dream images feel universal even now. Endless roads, distant lights, storms, oceans, houses, forests, falling, flying, searching, returning home. These themes resonate because they connect to experiences deeply embedded within human psychology itself. The dreaming mind speaks in ancient emotional languages older than words. As the final hours before dawn approach somewhere on Earth, sleepers continue drifting through these invisible inner landscapes. Some turn gently in their sleep as dream narratives shift around them. Others lie perfectly still while entire emotional worlds unfold silently inside the brain. Soon, many of those worlds will dissolve completely with morning light, but tonight they are real to the dreamers within them. Temporary realities carried across the dark, fragile universes rising from consciousness itself, then disappearing again before the day begins.